5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on Mr. Casey's questioning, just briefly, not only are we here to hopefully get bipartisan support for reform of our tax code, hopefully we'll have a bipartisan support for fair implementation of our tax code. But that's not this hearing. Thanks for coming, Mr. Chairman. You testified with regard to the need to, in essence, keep the spigots going with regard to monetary and fiscal policy, that you're going to continue to print money, drive interest rates down, that we should continue to borrow and spend on our end in the short term to help grow the economy and work on our debt in the long term. I'm sure you're well aware of these numbers, but if you look at how much we've spent since 2008, the federal government in 2008 spent $2.9 trillion. In 2009, during the course of the stimulus bill, we spent $3.5 trillion. So the year of the stimulus bill, $3.5 trillion, $500 billion jump. This year, the CBO projects us to spend $3.4 trillion. So we're almost spending this year the same amount we spent in the year of the $800 billion stimulus bill. But your testimony today is that the cuts have been too significant. We need to actually spend more in conjunction with your printing. Could you explain that a little further for me, why we need to spend more when we're already $500 billion more in spending from fiscal year 08?
Well, first, I didn't say spending. I talked about the whole package, which included tax increases and elimination of the payroll tax cut. I'm saying put all that together, and it's a drag on the economy. The government, since the stimulus, the government has been tightening its belt pretty significantly. I mentioned in my testimony that there are 800,000 fewer government employees today than there were a few years ago. And I'm not advocating, I'm not here to advocate, a major new stimulus program. I'm simply saying that a rebalancing between a somewhat slower tightening in the near term and more aggressive and systematic attempt to address the longer term imbalances where the big problems really are, I think that would be better. And I'm not, please don't misunderstand me, I'm not in any way denying the importance of fiscal responsibility. I just think it's not the best way to go about it to focus entirely on the short term and ignore the long term.
And I would agree with you on that point. One of the problems in this town is that we see the long-term implications of the course that we're on. And you're well aware of the politics in these two chambers and with the White House. And you've seen our side, I think, aggressively talk about the long-term implications of our aging population and the impact on Medicare. And that, I think you would agree, is the driver of our debt. Yes? You'd agree with that, right?
On the spending side, healthcare costs and aging are very important, yes.
And what program does that spending come from? Medicare,
right?
And Medicaid. Right. So you know that on our side of the aisle, we're trying to actually reform it and make it sustainable. And one of the frustrations is we're not able to get buy-in with others to actually join us in that effort. And it's one thing to say, listen, I don't like the Republicans' plan, but then the other side has to put out a plan that actually makes it sustainable too. Wouldn't you agree?
I'm sorry.
Makes Medicare sustainable in the long term.
We certainly want to do that, yes.
Yes, and both sides should put out plans that make Medicare sustainable so they can negotiate, correct?
Well, I don't want to get into negotiations, but...
No, but I'm talking policy-wise.
From a policy perspective, yes, we want Medicare to be sustainable, and we want the budget overall to be sustainable.
And we want two sides to put out plans that make Medicare sustainable, right?
There needs to be obviously some bipartisan way of negotiating whatever it is you're going to do.
And to negotiate that, both sides put out plans. One of my concerns with your testimony when you talk about the headwinds is you didn't talk about regulations. When I talk to my small business owners, people back in Wisconsin, they're concerned about the things you mentioned, but they're also concerned about the rules, the regulations, the red tape. Government is getting in their way when they're looking at expanding and growing their business. When you have someone who is looking at starting a business, they will cite rules and regulations and government interference as a problem. And I guess I see that as one of the headwinds as well, and that wasn't referenced. I wonder if you see that as a concern.
It is a concern. Smart regulation is very important. I wonder, though, whether these regulations are ones that have just been imposed or whether they are things that have been in place for a long time. In talking about headwinds, I was looking at factors that were specific to this recovery as opposed to longer-term growth issues.
And just quickly, I know your term is up in January.
Right.
If offered a second term by the president, would you accept?
I'm not prepared to answer that question now.
Okay. Some of us are concerned about the policies that have been implemented and the long-term impacts that won't take effect in the next 6 months, but will impact us 3, 4, 5, and 6 years down the road. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Representative.